Welcome to the Sales Leverage Pip the President's Club podcast. My name is Ryan Johns, founder and CEO of Sales Leverage. We started this podcast with the intent of re-educating the market on the most optimal ways to achieve sales and revenue success. Our guests consist of revenue leaders and individual contributors across sales, marketing, business development, customer success, and even product engineering. Believe it or not, all of these teams play a critical role in the overall success of the modern revenue org. We address the most pressing challenges and offer actionable solutions that not only simplifies the complex sales process, but we help to better align and integrate adjacent teams. I don't know how many of you all listening have experience working in the revenue ecosystem, large organizations. I mean, those like sales, marketing, biz dev, engineering, they're pretty siloed, unfortunately, still to this day. They don't speak the same language. The information and data transfer between those teams is still very broken and clunky. And that's why we do what we do. That's one of the reasons why. If you want to improve your business, if you want to improve your bottom line, you must focus on eliminating efficiency across the organization. It is very possible to do, not easy, but it's definitely very possible. I've had training for almost 2 decades. I don't know if you guys remember back in the day, Six Sigma, Lean Sigma, all those Kaizen, those are designed to reduce or remove inefficiency and waste. And all those same principles can be applied into really any area of business, anything that's process driven, anything that requires time, effort, all of those areas can be optimized through efficiency. So that is the absolute most critical step. Okay. But anyway, so what I want to talk about today, you can see I am solo, I am traveling, and probably will be quite a bit over the next couple months. It's just a really, really busy time for us. For me in particular, establishing a number of different partnerships, client visits. There's just a lot that needs to be done to lay the groundwork for a strong 2024. We're preparing for 2024, of course. So the topic today is something that's near and dear to my heart. I think a few episodes we kind of touched on it a little bit. We're going to go a bit deeper today, and it's around the growing leadership gap. Okay, the growing leadership gap and the potentially catastrophic impact that it's going to have on the revenue org. This is something that everyone needs to pay attention to. If you are an executive, senior leader, people operations, you really, really need talent, right? Recruitment, you really, really need to pay attention to what's happening right now. And it's because it's pretty alarming what's going on in the middle management sector for a number of companies, especially in the revenue org space, or in the revenue org, I guess, department, that division. It's pretty alarming. There's a lot of companies talking about this. So I'm going to give you a couple of articles and let's just dig into it. So I'm going to get into some of the data. So, I mean, we have some amazing media outlets out there highlighting some of this stuff and the things going on in the global business community. I just don't see, I think the solutions to the problems, like we highlight the problems, the media outlets are highlighting the problems, telling us what's going on. They're doing the surveys, like your Glassdoor, your Fortune magazine, all these companies, even Predictive Index, one of my favorite companies, they're doing a lot of good research. Very few, I'd say Predictive Index definitely has some extremely tactical, practical, science-based solutions. But like a lot of these big consulting firms I'm listening to that I love and follow, they're still like the advice is still very vague and anecdotal. It's just like too conceptual. It doesn't get to the meat of what really needs to be done. So again, I just think very few people are offering actionable insights on how to solve this problem. We can talk about the problem all day. We can talk about it from every angle you can think of, but we got to solve this. We got to work on doing this together. So here's my attempt to give some root cause analysis, some clarity, and hopefully some solutions that will resonate with you. So the first article I'm going to look at, it's burnout. It says burnout comes from middle managers. And this is from Taylor Borden. She's a editor at LinkedIn News. So this was really interesting. I like a lot of the articles they put out. So really insightful. But so it says, Most managers need a break. According to a recent Glassdoor survey, junior and senior level employees currently have work life balances levels similar to last year. Okay, cool. But middle managers working for large employers experienced a sharp drop in 2023. Experts say one possible reason is a lack of training. Yeah, probably has something to do with it, I'm sure. It says most of today's managers are accidental. Wow. And that they stepped up to lead amid the pandemic without ample coaching. Totally can understand that, right? Noble, it's praiseworthy, but leadership is not something that you just step into without understanding the cost, right? There has to be, to me, the best leaders have an intrinsic motivation for leadership. I don't know if you remember a few years back, I wrote a book about leadership, being the optimal leader from both a tactical and strategic perspective, from a cultural perspective, because I understand leaders, true leaders, are the cornerstone of every organization. But again, this article is talking about the lack of training and the lack of resource and support. The result is they're saying 1 in 3 leaders are calling it quits. They're stepping down. They don't want to do this. They don't want the role of leader or manager. Another thing they said, another reason this is happening is this middle managers are caught between higher ups pushing for a return to the office and direct reports worried about flexibility and stagnant wages. Valid concerns. Message to executives that are pushing for folks to come back into the office, you probably should give that up. I mean, hybrid and fully remote workforces are the way of now and the future. We are not going back. There are too many options out there to require your people to come into the office. Again, hybrid, I'm cool with. And then there's certain roles, of course. I mean, but again, when we're talking the revenue ecosystem, revenue ops, those can definitely be remote and hybrid roles. Like that is not, you're not required to be in the office to be effective. It's a control play in a lot of instances. And I just think senior leaders have not figured out a way to effectively hold people accountable beyond just the number, right? The number they need to, close or whatever. Like that's easy, but there has to be some accountability in how we work, right? The quality of work, not just making the bottom line number. So we'll get into some of that too. It says here, those across the workforce are taking note of this burnout. A separate survey from, I don't know if it's Vizier found that it says it found that 38% of U.S. professionals in individual contributor roles want to eventually transition into people management. They're saying they only 38% want to go into management at their current organization. I mean, that's kind of scary to me. They did a survey, so this is kind of the voice of the participant, the voice of the survey. 1,000 participants. It says some don't want to land a manager job. They just don't want to. You know why? It's because they don't see the value. They don't see the value in management because it's a lot more responsibility. It's a lot more headache. It's a lot more administrative duties. It's a lot more politics and competing agendas, and the trade-off is not there from a compensation standpoint. And I'm not saying that's what it should be about because, again, I'm not a believer in being money motivated. I don't believe in that philosophy. I don't buy into it. And really, there's data that disproves that. It's something called the motive spectrum. I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but you need to look up the motive spectrum. And it tells you exactly what the top 3 motivators for optimal performance are. And money is not one of them. Money is like on the bottom end of the spectrum. So just letting you know, the science is the science. So don't shoot the messenger. But yeah, it says one millennial said the manager role she would move into next seems to be high pressure. Of course, I mean, that's good awareness. It is going to be high pressure. Another millennial said he can act as a leader while remaining as an individual contributor. So he wants to be kind of a team lead or whatever, or just, lead by example, but he doesn't want everything that comes along with leadership. And it's a lot. It really is a lot. And that's why I said earlier, you really have to be someone that has a passion and intrinsic motivation to lead people. a passion and intrinsic motivation to innovate, a passion and intrinsic motivation to improve culture and organizational health. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. I'm not sure how many of you all even have heard the term organizational health or know what that means, but it's something that we better start paying attention to. I've noticed so many companies, they focus on the easy stuff. They focus on bringing in bodies, they focus on the tech, they focus on the training, but nobody wants to tackle the people issue. They focus on the business strategy, but they are not focusing on the people strategy. You have to marry the two. You have to. I mean, or else our businesses won't exist if you can't do that. AI is not going to do it all. So, and it's not going to do it fast enough. As again, we have an issue here. So here's another article. This is a Fortune magazine article by Chloe Berger. Says 2023 was the year middle managers cracked under the impossible mission of pleasing two impossible parties, those parties being disenchanted or disengaged workers, their employees, and then fed up executives. From overseeing RTO plans to being put on the chopping block, middle managers are not okay. But what are we going to do about it? Right? It says the past year was a turning and sometimes tipping point in the white collar workforce, which was rife with layoffs and return to office mandates. Big, big mistake. At the center of it all, the middle manager, the burned out second rung of leadership, is the least satisfied with their jobs right now, according to Glassdoor's 2024 Workplace Trends Report. Where there is smoke, there's fire. There's definitely a fire smoldering in middle management, and we're going to have to figure it out. I mean, I think we can, but we have to be honest with why this is happening, right? And where things are going. So here are some of my root causes of this stuff, right? We just talked about, or I just talked to you about what the data says, how managers are feeling, what the negative impact is, the future view of management and leadership from a millennial perspective. They don't even want it. They want no parts of it. So let's get into it. So there are three root causes of burnout that very few talk about or understand. So we're going to get into some behavioral science here, okay? Bear with me. I hope this doesn't bore you. It shouldn't. It should shift your perspective and where you should kind of reprioritize some of the resources. Again, if you are a senior leader listening to this podcast. So root cause number one of three: when you are in a role for a long period of time that does not align with your natural behavioral tendencies or your long-term work experience. That is one of the top reasons for burnout. If you're in a role that does not align with your natural behavioral tendencies or your long-term work experience, to avoid burnout, you need to either be conditioned to do the work, meaning you've been doing it for a long time, right? So you have some fortitude and some resolve, and you know what I mean? You understand what comes with it. You've built, you've kind of fortified yourself and to do that type of work. Or you have to possess innate ability or strong intrinsic motivation. If you look at, I don't know if you have, most of you have probably done these behavioral studies from a predictive index or a DISC or whatever, so on and so forth. But that stuff is really, really important. Studies show that when your behavioral tendencies align with the requirements of the job, like your natural behavioral tendencies align with the requirements of the job itself, that's another thing we got to be really honest with and get better at our job descriptions. Job descriptions are so misleading. That's something you can't just leave to HR. You need to have a person that's done the work, been in the role, been in the trenches, understands the day to day. They need to help with writing the job description. That's probably first and foremost, right? Because when you don't have a clear understanding of what's required and you make assumptions, you're going to do the same thing with your hiring. You're going to assume you have the best hire when you do not have the best hire. I'm trying to think what I was reading earlier today, and I may have it in the notes where it was talking about leaders from other companies are being hired to, tech companies or small companies or whatever. Put it this way, they've had success in companies that may have been, let's say, in the startup space. They've had success there, but that leader may have come in at a different stage of growth for that business. So they were kind of set up to have success, right? But when you bring someone in at ground level, like you hire a new leader and they have to build something from scratch or paint on a blank canvas and they've never done that before, they are going to fail, at least at first. It's depending on the learning curve. I mean, everybody's a little bit different. But anyway, companies have to start using science, start using behavioral science. We're all wired to do a particular thing, right? We all have a level of intelligence. We all have gifts and unique talents and things that we enjoy. When you can find someone and put them in a role that they actually enjoy and they can thrive and be good at, even if they don't have all the experience in the world, they are going to give you above and beyond effort and they will be successful. And that's another thing that studies show, like, because the work becomes less like work, it's more like play, right? So what I do, my role doesn't feel like work because I enjoy it. I know it's part of my purpose. It's what I'm supposed to be doing. And my behavioral tendency is to teach, it's to educate, it's to enable, right? It's to solve root issues, right? So this is not hard for me. I can do this in my sleep. I enjoy it. I don't care if it's 16, 20 hours, whatever it is. I just enjoy doing it. I lose track of time. That's probably why I'm rambling now, but I enjoy this so much and I've been doing it for so long. It just, again, it doesn't seem like work. It requires effort, but it doesn't feel like work to me. Okay. So go back to the talent and role misalignment being a hidden but significant drain on people. So when your talent, your innate ability doesn't align with the role, you're going to struggle. I don't know how many sports fans I have out here that listen to the podcast. So think about, you got a multi-sport athlete in high school, right? High school is different, right? But think about the progression from high school to college to the pros, right? There are plenty of athletes out there that are pro level now. Like they may be whatever the position, doesn't matter. Chances are they didn't play that position in high school. They played quarterback in high school or they played running back. But then when they get to the NFL, when it's like the best of the best, again, it requires a different skill set, a different attention to detail. You have to be elite. So when you're in the elite class, you can't do the same things that you did in high school and have success. You can't do the same things you did in college and have success, right? It requires just a different ability. And it's the same thing in the workforce. So when managers progress or when they transition, the success they had in the role prior to is not guaranteed to carry over to the new role. There's a different requirement, there's different dynamics, right? And so you can't just assume because someone has been in a managerial role, that they're going to have success in each one that they transition into. But anyway, I don't know if that was a great example or not, but we have to use science. We have to get more granular with how we evaluate individuals for roles, because if you put a person in the right role, they're not going to get tired. They're not going to get burned. Well, I'm not going to say they won't get tired, but they won't be burnt out. There's going to be a fuel inside of them. Their why is stronger than any obstacle they're going to encounter. So look at companies like the predictive index. Look at tools like the tools that they sell and they offer, but you have to use them on a consistent basis. That is my solution to combating or preventing, being proactive and preventing burnout. Start with human behavioral science. The more you understand, the more you know about people, the more success you're probably going to have with them, right? All right. So, anyway, number 2 out of 3, when I was talking about the root causes of burnout. So, number 2 is when there is too much cultural ambiguity. Think about what that means. Cultural ambiguity. There's no consistency. There's no clarity, right? You could report to a leader that hasn't established a concise and consistent vision for the organization. That will lead to burnout because things always change. It's like the things change. What's the flavor of the month? I've worked for leaders like that, and it's definitely a drain on the culture overall. When you don't have clarity and consistency as far as where we're going, why we're going there, like it's hard to follow. right? The second one is when a person doesn't understand how their work maps to the overall vision, people can get burnt out. And I've seen it hundreds of times. People get caught up doing the busy work, the day to day, and they don't understand how this maps to revenue, to profitability, or whatever it is, right? You need to understand every person in the organization needs to be able to connect the dots of their role, knowing what their role is. So again, another sports analogy. You've got football, you've got 11 people on each side of the ball, but everyone has a different role. And they need to understand, like, hey, I'm not going to be the person that scores necessarily if you're maybe an offensive lineman, but your role is critical to the overall success of every component of that play working effectively. It's the same thing in business. When you understand how your role maps to the overall goal and vision, it gets you excited, right? You can celebrate the wins with a level of authenticity, right? And it keeps you motivated and keeps you engaged. Every person on this earth wants to matter. I would say the two fundamental needs of any human being are safety and belonging. Belonging is one that we miss so much in so many different sectors. When you lose a sense of belonging, you feel alienated, you feel alone, you feel depressed, right? That's where burnout happens. And in some sectors, burnout leads to catastrophic and fatal outcomes, unfortunately. But it all boils down to, if you really unpack it, it boiled down to a lack of belonging. So you must make sure that employees understand how their individual work maps to the overall vision and big picture outcomes of the company. Third piece to this, number two, I guess the subtopic to this, to number two, is when there is a lack of unbiased behavioral accountability, meaning a lack of follow through and consistency from the top down. This is common. There is no accountability, behavioral accountability, unbiased behavioral accountability from the upper levels of leadership down. There's a gap, there's a breakdown somewhere, right? It's just like, when if you don't have a model to preserve your culture and organizational health, it's going to have weak points, right? And that's going to be a problem for the overall business. Think about it. Remember when we were kids and we played that game where it's like, one person has a message or they'll say something and they pass it to someone else, they whisper it in their ear, and then so on and so forth. And by the time it gets to like the fifth or 10th person or whatever, the message is totally different. That was a learning that we should have taken with us into adulthood and then into business. The exchange of information, if it's not preserved, can create a totally different and unintended outcome if that consistency isn't maintained. So again, solution, here's a solution. Companies need to work on ongoing organizational health training. So when they talk about training, they didn't get specific. When we were talking about earlier, like people said, "Oh, we're burnt out, we're struggling because we didn't get adequate training." What type of training? There's leadership training in the micro, right? That you probably heard of this guy, Patrick Lencioni. I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. I got a couple of his books. The one that's, I believe, that's most popular are the five dysfunctions of a team. That's a very micro focused book, right? The team focus. But there's another one to me that's even better. I think it's a later one that he wrote. It's called The Advantage. The Advantage from Peter, right? The advantage is why organizational health trumps everything else in business. You need to check out that book. So when I talk about ongoing organizational health and training and enablement models, start with that book. And I've done some of this training as well. So I mean, if you guys don't know where to start or don't know how to create that infrastructure for training like that, you can reach out to me. I can help offer some guidance there to get you headed in the right direction. But that's a big one. Okay. And then the third and final root cause to burnout. This is a big one. I think this one's kind of obvious. When the workload, expectations, and assumptions are too large, that's when managers burn out. Senior leaders, from what I've seen, have made it unsafe for middle managers to ask for help and support. And I was actually talking to a few of my colleagues about it in the consulting space. That's one of the barriers, man. It's the ego. It's either ego or a lack of safety. Like, what did I say? Safety and belonging. That's what humans need. So when a person feels unsafe or ashamed to ask for help, they're going to fail on an island a lot of times. And they don't have to. Some of these managers, they're being paid salaries 200, 250, 300,000, and they're just being expected to figure it out. So there's probably some sunken costs there as well from senior leaders feeling like, well, I paid you, middle manager, X number of dollars. You should just be able to figure it out. It's not that easy, right? There is a huge perception gap between the executive's reality and the middle manager's reality. I don't know if you guys remember, there was a report back maybe 2, 3 years ago from Accenture talking about bridging the perception gap. And this is basically a multi-trillion-dollar gap based on just perception, the lens that we see reality or we see things through. There's a big gap between the senior and executives and the middle managers, the frontline and middle managers. If we solve that alone, you're talking a multi-trillion-dollar net positive gain. Again, I'm just the messenger. I didn't do the research. You check it out on your own. Like I said, it was Accenture that did it. Maybe you can Google Accenture and the perception gap. Managers are expected to be operational experts, strategists, HR, motivational speakers, and sometimes even player coaches, right? They carry an individual quota when I'm talking about in sales, right? I've seen leaders that middle managers that carry an individual quota and they're responsible for the team quota. So if you said, hey, what's the job description for an operational expert, a strategist, an HR person, motivational speaker, a player coach, what job title is that? what would that be? But that's essentially what a lot of executives are asking middle managers to function as. So the solution here, I believe, is if you want a quick solution, right? Because everybody wants things fast. So if you have middle managers and they're spread too thin, and it's not because a lot of them don't have good intentions and don't have the will to do, they just don't have the bandwidth. They may not have the bandwidth from a time and capacity standpoint. They may not have the bandwidth from a cognitive standpoint, from an experience perspective. There are lots of fractional leaders out here that can help bridge that gap. Not to come take over, not to necessarily run the team, but just to augment the resource. Utilize what you have. This is my message to executives. Stop allowing your ego to get in the way of your company's growth, stability, and organizational health, because that's the most important thing. The organizational health. So reach out to companies, right? Interview some fractional leaders. There's tons of them out there. I've got a network of fractional leaders. Like, we just want to help. You know what I mean? Like, we don't want to work with you full time anyway. So that's why we do what we do, right? But we do want to add value to as many companies as possible. And so I think we can solve a lot of this together. If we learn to collaborate, if we learn to get out of our own way, if we just, again, have enough self-awareness to say, hey, I can't solve this on my own. I don't have the answers to all this, on my own. I need help. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. It's probably the wisest thing you're going to do in 2023 going into 2024 is ask for help. Okay? So anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. I hope this was beneficial. Thank you for helping us take the next step toward becoming the #1 revenue enablement podcast in the world. We are committed to two things. Again, simplifying the complex sales process and removing efficiency gaps across the entire revenue org. It is very possible. We are doing it. We're going to continue to do it. Take a moment to like and subscribe so that you can receive alerts on future episodes. Also, follow us on our other social platforms for transformative insights and tactics that will give you the leverage to win more deals and maximize your revenue while doing it. So again, follow us on YouTube, Sales Leverage 365. All other platforms are salesleverage.ai. Listen out for us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, all of the above. So much, much more to come. We got some big news coming for 2024. An amazing product coming to market, an academy. Like there's so much happening at Sales Leverage, and my team has been working so hard. And I think we're going to drive some change. Change is needed. Re-education is needed, but we can't do it alone. Okay. So hope this was helpful. You guys have a great night and a great week. Take care.